Shalom Uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. The continued study of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, Chapter 1, Mishnah 5, Pirkei Avot, Mishnah Hey. This evening here in Eretz Yisrael, here in Yerushalayim, is Yom Yerushalayim, the great day of the celebration of the great miracles that God performed, so that we should be able to celebrate here in the holy city. And by divine providence, the Mishnah that we study this evening is the Mishnah that is being taught by one of the leaders of Yerushalayim. So there is some connection between our study of Pirkei Avot this evening and Yerushalayim, even though I did not intend it to be that way. It just worked out from heaven to be the teaching of tonight here in honor of Yerushalayim. Yosei ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim Omer. Yosei ben Yochanan. Those people who remember last week we studied about the two great leaders of the community. One was Yosei ben Yoezer from Tzreida. That was last week's teaching. And Yosei ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. Yosei ben Yochanan from Yerushalayim. Now there are two ways to translate Ish Yerushalayim. One can learn that he's identified as a man of Jerusalem. He's a Jerusalemite, a Yerushalmi. There are those who say that no, Ish Yerushalayim means the man of Yerushalayim. He was the leader, one of the leading towering figures in Yerushalayim. Yosei ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim Omer. I would like to posit that perhaps there's a way of learning the teachings of the person of Yerushalayim to somehow seek in his words or in his teachings a special connection to the holy city. This is not necessarily an approach that I saw in the commentaries, but I somehow feel it. Maybe, thank God that we're here in Yerushalayim, maybe I feel a little bit of Ish Yerushalayim teaching as we're reading it. Yihi beitecha patuach l'rivha v'yu aniyim b'nei veitecha. Open your home wide, l'rivha, revach. Open your home in a very wide way, and have the poor people feel at home in your home. Let them feel as part of your family. V'yu aniyim b'nei veitecha. Yihi beitcha patuach l'rivha. The Rav, Rabbeinu Obadiah, Mibar Tanura, and others in the commentary on our Mishnah teach that, and I quote, "Yihi beitcha patuach l'rivcha ki beito shel Avraham Avinu alav hashalom she'ya patuach l'arba ruchot ha'olam." Open your home, as did our father Abraham, as did our mother Sarah, and have the home open on all four sides. The simple interpretation of why the advantages of having the home open on all four sides is that everyone has immediate, direct access to your home. The people coming from the north and to the northern entrance, the southern entrance, the eastern entrance, the western, everybody just walks right in. They don't have to walk around. As those people who've ever felt the frustration, I'm not criticizing anyone. I know that in certain parts of the world, when there's snow and there's sleet and there's hail, and people come trudging up the steps, and you have a beautiful white carpet and a beautiful white, and there's a big sign on the door. The person is freezing. They finally made it to your house. There's a sign that please don't use this entrance. Walk around and use the other entrance. Sometimes it's very frustrating. I assume such signs didn't appear on the house of Abraham and Sarah. Their doors were open on all four sides. That's patuach. Patuach. Four entrances. Rabbi Cook says it means not just physically open on all four sides. He says patuach means that you have to be open to the people from all of the different directions, conceptually. You see, if I'm from the north, conceptually speaking, and you're from the north, conceptually speaking, wonderful, come right in. We think alike. You're my Lanzman. You're Anash. You're part of us. Wow, we're together. But if I think in a northern way, conceptually, and you think in a southern way, conceptually, Do I have room in my house for you? Go to the other person's house. Go to the house of the people that agree with you. If you're from the west and I'm from the east, maybe you can't enter my house. Says Rav Kook, when it speaks about the door being open, the doors being open on all four sides, it means that they incorporated into their home. They included in their home even people who didn't approach life exactly the way they did, who had different understanding. And maybe that's part of the patuach, the revacha, opening one's home. Of course, one has to do so with caution and with care and with great prayer. But maybe there is such a concept. And let poor people feel at home in your home. Don't treat them as outsiders. Don't treat them as if you're doing them the biggest favor in the world. The Zohar says that when God wants to give a gift to an individual, God sends a special gift to that person, and the greatest gift that God sends is a poor person that shows up at the door. If God sends you a poor person to your door, God really loves you and is sending you a heavenly doron, a heavenly gift. I learned, I believe it was in Yalkut Me'am Loez, if I'm not mistaken. He says, Yehi beitcha patuach l'revacha, v'yu aniyim b'nei beitecha, means that the only way that you will be able to accomplish poor people feeling comfortable in your house is if you open up your house in a very wide way. But if you limit your visitors, if you limit your guests, and you're only interested in impoverished, broken-hearted, poor people, that's very noble. That's great. But you have a house for the poor. In a certain sense, maybe lo yiyu aniyim b'nei beitecha. In a certain sense, maybe the poor will not feel comfortable in your house because they don't want the stigma of entering a house which is only limited to poor people. But if he beitcha patuach l'revacha, if everybody's welcome, so no one knows who anyone is. Am I a wealthy visitor? Am I a troubled visitor? Am I one of the people who supports the entire program? Who am I? Am I the executive? Am I it's a camouflage approach, a camouflage effect. No one can identify anyone because the house is so widely open. That's what I saw in several of the commentaries. And perhaps l'revacha, according to certain people, certain commentaries and certain translators, the word revacha, that's the way it's used here in Israel and spoken Hebrew as well. Revacha has a certain sense of relief, like the Misrad HaRevacha.
Social economic relief.
Social economic assistance, Lishkat HaRevacha. Maybe Hi Beitcha Patuach l'Revacha. There are so many people in the world who need relief, so many people in the world who need assistance, so many people in the world who need someone to help them. Maybe your house could be that house that's open for that purpose. And I would like to suggest that maybe this is the teaching of Ish Yerushalayim. Yossi ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim, because that's what Yerushalayim is all about. Yerushalayim opens its doors for everyone. The whole world comes to Yerushalayim. So Yossi ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim Omer, Yehi Beitcha Patuach l'Revacha. Since he is the man of Yerushalayim, since he's one of the leaders of Yerushalayim, he understands Jerusalem is the metropolis of the world. Jerusalem is the capital of the world. All people come from all over the world. And Yehi Beitcha Patuach l'Revacha. Yerushalayim provides Revacha. Yerushalayim provides assistance for everyone. So many different people with so many different issues end up in Yerushalayim. What are they doing in Yerushalayim? Because they know this is the haven of the world for Revacha. So since Yossi ben Yochanan is sensitized by Yerushalayim, Yossi ben Yochanan teaches about, Patuach l'Revacha as the Ish Yerushalayim. And the rabbis teach that in Yerushalayim, there was a custom. The Gemara says in Masechet Bava Batra, on page Tzadik Gimel Amud Bet, Minhag Gadol Hayab Yerushalayim. There was a great custom in Yerushalayim that Mapa Prusa Al Gabei HaPetach. They would hang tablecloths outside the doors of Yerushalayim. It means if you'd be passing by a house and you'd see a tablecloth, the tablecloth indicated mealtime. Why don't you join us? There were tablecloths hanging all over Yerushalayim. Kol zman shemapa prusa orachim nichnasim. It was open to guests. So Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim is aware of the customs of Jerusalem, and he understands that in Jerusalem everybody's patuach l'rvacha. That's what you have to do in Yerushalayim. You know, if you lived in Yerushalayim, how could you not invite people to your house? There were millions of people that came to Yerushalayim. Millions of people. The Shalosh Regalim. You know how many Jews showed up in Yerushalayim? You know how many non-Jews visited Yerushalayim? You know how many non-Jews will visit Yerushalayim? You know how many Jews are coming to Yerushalayim? How could anyone ever have lived in Yerushalayim? Let's say during Shavuot. That's right, Hashem, next week is Shavuot. You know how many people came to Yerushalayim? Where did they stay? Where did they eat? So the people of Yerushalayim were sensitized to this concept of Patuach al-Dirvaha v'hiyu aniyim b'nei veitecha. And it could be, according to Rabbi Tzadok, a Kohen of Lublin, the great Rosh Yeshiva, Satzal of the yeshiva that I was privileged to study, Rav Shor. Rav Gedaliah Shor often quoted the teaching of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, who said that whenever you want to study a certain concept, study the first time that concept is mentioned in Tanakh. The first mention, seemingly, of Yerushalayim in Tanakh, there is no mention of Jerusalem openly in the Chumash. Rambam, the Maimonides in the Guide for the Perplexed, has a discussion of why does the word Jerusalem, why does the word Yerushalayim not appear in the Chumash? It appears for the first time in the book of Joshua, in the book of Yoshua. But the first reference to Jerusalem is the reference to Salem, to Shalem, and the first reference to Shalem has something to do with bringing food and drinks. Umalki tzedek melech Shalem, hotzi lechem vayayin. That's what we read in the book of Bereshit. Can we suggest, if that's really the first reference, that's what Yerushalayim is about? Bring forth, take out provisions of food and drinks. You have to feed and provide drinks for everyone because you're in Yerushalayim. Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. And maybe lechem and yayin don't necessarily mean only literally, bread and wine. In the book of Proverbs, in the book of Mishnah, we read in chapter 9, verse 5, L'chu lahamu b'lahami ushtu b'yayin masachti. Please come and partake of my food and drink of the wine that I have prepared, that I have mixed. So the drinking and the eating of the food, of the bread and of the wine, is not only literally bread and wine. It represents concepts, wisdom, understanding, insights. Maybe that's part of the lechem and yayin of Yerushalayim. I'd like to continue in the Mishnah. Va'al tarbeh siha im ha'isha. And do not overly indulge in frivolous discussions with women. Now, the flow in this Mishnah, what is the connection between the beginning of the Mishnah and this teaching about al tarbeh siha im ha'isha, is a bit of a puzzle for many of the commentaries. And it's a beautiful teaching, and we could elaborate on this teaching, but there has to be some kind of thread that combines the Mishnah. According to certain schools of thought, what's being said is, even though we have now learned how important it is to open your home to everyone, and that means that you'll have all kinds of people visiting with you and all kinds of people talking with you, be careful. Make sure that you do so only in an appropriate way. Al tarbeh siha im ha'isha. Be careful of the kinds of conversations you carry on with women who will be entering your home, especially if you're following the teaching of Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. Rabbi Hirsch and others, I've seen many of the commentaries, that siha is not just speech. Siha is lighthearted speech, frivolous speech, maybe joking speech, suggestive speech. Sicha. So be careful. Just be careful. I mean, maybe sicha is not a problem, but tarbeh sicha, an abundance of such speech, overly indulging in such kinds of discussions can lead a person away from God. Al tarbeh sicha im ha'isha. I believe that the references in the Talmud for al tarbeh sicha im ha'isha does not mean just, you could have said something in 4 words. Why did you say it in 3? Why did you say it in 5 words? Or why do you say 6 sentences? You could have done it in 4 sentences. And I'd like to read a section in Masechet Eruvin, page 53b, Nun Gimel Mebed in Eruvin, where there was a great rabbi who was walking on the road. If you're interested in the name of the rabbi, look up the Gemara yourself. There was a great rabbi who was walking on the road, and he meets Bruria. And he says to Bruria, Amar la, be'ezod derech neilech lelud. Which way to Lud? Which way to Lud? He's asking directions. How do you get to Lud? Amrale, glili shoteh. That's the way you speak. Lo kach ha'ameru chachamim. Don't you remember the teaching of the rabbis? Al tarbeh siha im ha'isha. What are you saying? Be'ezo derech neilech lelud. 4 words. You could have condensed it. You could have just said Hayal chalomar be'ezel lelud. Be'ezo derech neilech lelud. You could have just said be'ezel lelud. Now, for a long time, I used to think that maybe what's being said here is there's a way of saying the same thing in 2 words. Why did you use 4 words? That's tarbeh sicha. However, I think the true meaning of this text is, if you listen carefully, he said to her, Be'ezo derech neilech lelud. You know what neilech means?
Together.
Yeah, together. How do we go to Lud? How do we go to Lud? That's the way you speak to a married woman. How are we going to go to Lud? What do you mean? How do we go to? You're not going to Lud with Bruria. Bruria. Hayal chalomar be'ezel lelud. Not neilech lelud. Neilech lelud. I think this may be close to the true interpretation of the text. It's al tarbeh siha misha, suggestive speech, not just abundant speech. Continues the Mishnah and says, "V'ishto amiru," because there are times where even to speak to one's own wife in such a way is problematic. For instance, even though romantic talk between husband and wife is surely permitted and encouraged, there's a time and a place for it. V'ishto amiru. Let's say, even given the context. I once taught this Mishnah. One of my great teachers, one of my great students, said this as his interpretation. I don't remember his name, but I think it's a beautiful interpretation. I didn't see it in the commentaries, but it's his commentary. He says, we're learning here about hospitality. Maybe even b'ishto al tarbeh sicha. Let's say you have a house full of people. Is that the time now to start talking to each other about how much you love each other? Like b'ishto amru. It's inappropriate in certain contexts. That's the interpretation of one of my great students. I think it's a beautiful pirush. Or according to some, there are times in a marriage where a husband and wife are not supposed to be physically intimate with each other. Let's say during the time of nidah. So even between husband and wife, there's a limitation of certain kinds of very personal types of speech, of speech which can be suggestive. Kavachomer, surely with someone else's wife. One is speaking in a frivolous fashion with other women, with married women. And based on this teaching, our sages taught how careful one has to be about talking with inappropriately with women, especially with married women. This too can be a sense of a teaching of Yosef ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim mikudeshet mikol Eretz Yisrael, the holiest city in the world, the holiest part of Eretz Yisrael, mikudeshet mikol Aratzot, but Yerushalayim mikudeshet mikol Eretz Yisrael. The holiest part of the world is Yerushalayim. Maybe if you're in the holiest city, be especially sensitive not only to your kindness, not only to acts of philanthropy, not only acts of sensitivity, but also to speech. I know someone, he told me, perhaps certain people would mock this practice, but I surely respect it on some level. He told me that he goes to the movies, and he says, but he has a rule that he took upon himself. He never goes to the movies in Yerushalayim. When he goes to the movies, he goes outside of Yerushalayim. And he said when he told it to certain people, they said, if the movie is appropriate, so what's wrong with going to the movies in Yerushalayim? If the movie is inappropriate, so what's the difference if it's Yerushalayim? But that's his rule, as we told him, not in Yerushalayim. Could it be that maybe a certain special level of sensitivity to Yerushalayim? Mikana meru chachamim Kol zman she'adam marbeh siha im ha'isha. If a person speaks in a frivolous fashion with a woman, especially a woman who is not permitted, it is prohibited for him at that point to be close with that woman. A person has to be very, very careful. There's a very, very fine line between flirting with someone and speaking with someone. And sometimes it's the tone, sometimes it's the choice of words, sometimes it's the voice intonation, sometimes it's a suggestive level of speech. One has to be very careful. Kol hamarbeh, excessively. Whoever excessively speaks in an inappropriate way, in ha'isha, gorem ra'al atzmo, if God forbid be causing damage to oneself, ubotel midivrei Torah, and leads a person away from the words of the Torah because they're so into their social contact with this woman that they forget about the words of the Torah. We do encourage conversation, we do encourage discussions, but one has to know the limits of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. In many communities, they have certain standards, and some of the standards are objective standards. Some of them are subjective. Some of them depend upon the particular community, and one has to be very, very careful. Baruch Hashem, in many Torah observant communities, precisely because they were so careful about sicha, therefore never went anywhere beyond that, because they were so careful in inappropriate kinds of comments or remarks between men and women. Gorem ra'al atzmo v'otel midivrei Torah v'sofa yoresh gehina. And God forbid not only cause him damage in this world, but in the next world as well. Such a person can end up in Gehinna, some kind of level of a Jewish understanding of what commonly known as hell. Of course, Gehinna is more complex than that. Maybe we'll talk about it in a different context. So, fo yoresh Gehinna. So, although there's this concept of openness, it's interesting. The Mishnah speaks about it goes very open, be open, be open, be open. At the same time, the end of the Mishnah seems to be saying, well, you have to know how to be open and at the same time be closed. And that's the challenge, I guess, of Torah all the time. On the one hand, open, on the other hand, caution. And we do hope that here in Yerushalayim, which is the city of balance, we'll be able to find the proper levels of behavior, especially this evening as we all celebrate here in Yerushalayim. We want to bless everyone. The most meaningful, beautiful, enjoyable Yom Yerushalayim. There's still time to arrive and to celebrate here in Yom Yerushalayim with the people here in Yerushalayim. It's a great, great celebration, and we hope that everyone together we can all appreciate the great gifts of God in Yerushalayim. Tov lahodot laHashem u'lezamer l'shimcha elyon. Samachti ba'omrim li Beit Hashem nilech omedot ha'ir ragleinu b'sha'arayich Yerushalayim. Thank you.